Well, thank you, Abby, for that kind introduction. It is a pleasure to be back at Politics and Prose, Washington's literary landmark. You know you've arrived when you can speak here, and I am extremely happy to be back. I want to begin my discussion of my book, The Road to Global Prosperity, with three assertions. The first assertion is that globalization, by which I mean the progressive integration of national economies, is here to stay. It will be with us going forward. Now that might seem to go without saying, given the remarkable and remarkably intense ongoing global integration that we've seen for most of the last 25 years. But if you look at the history of the genuinely global economy from its first emergence in the middle of the 19th century to the present, you'll see that global economic integration is almost as much the exception as the rule. Between 1914 and 1945, the era of the two world wars and the Great Depression, the global economy basically collapsed, didn't really exist. And from 1945 to 1990, there were important countries that were not full participants in the global economy. The communist countries, Mao's China and the Soviet Union, were completely outside it. And the socialist countries, such as India, were only intermittent and half-hearted participants. Well, since about 1990, the global economy has been, well, global in scope, and that, I believe, will continue into the foreseeable future for reasons that I will discuss at the end of my prepared remarks. So that's the first assertion. The second assertion is that although globalization will continue, its path will be a bumpy one. There will be pitfalls, potholes, shocks, roadblocks, and detours. And the reason for that is that the global economy is inextricably bound up with politics. Politics is the realm of conflict. So conflict will affect the global economy going forward. Now, the third assertion is that it is possible, within limits to be sure, to predict the future of the global economy. Here there is a useful analogy to the science of seismology, the study of earthquakes. Seismologists cannot predict with absolute reliability the incidence of earthquakes, but they do know where earthquakes will occur, and they know why they will occur. Earthquakes take place along cracks in the Earth's surface known as faults or fault lines. And similarly, there are major fault lines in the global economy, activity along which will shape the global economic future. There are, in fact, 4 such fault lines, which I discuss in some length in The Road to Global Prosperity. They are, first, the political framework that provides the necessary stability for global economic activity. The second is the inevitable backlash in every country against each of the 3 elements of globalization, that is, the cross-border movement of goods, of money, and of people, or, to put it in more familiar terms, trade, finance, and immigration. The third fault line is the world's free market financial systems, and the fourth fault line involves the prospects for economic growth in the emerging market economies, especially the 4 most important of them, the so-called BRICS, Brazil, Russia, India, and China. To put this assertion in slightly different terms, the future of the global economy depends upon the answers to four major questions. First, will the world be peaceful and stable enough to permit cross-border trade, finance, and immigration to flourish? Second, how strong will be the all but inevitable political backlash in every country against global economic activity? Third, how frequent and how disruptive will be the almost all but inevitable financial crises the world will see in the years ahead? And fourth, how effectively will Brazil, Russia, India, and China deal with the principal political obstacle to maximizing their potential for economic growth? Well, let me say a little bit about each of these four fault lines. All markets, whether local, regional, national, or global in scope, need a secure political framework to provide stability, because without stability, global economic transactions just don't happen. For the global economy, the principal and most dangerous source of instability is war. There are a number of economically important regions in the world where war is not necessarily likely, certainly not inevitable, but certainly possible. In East Asia, for example, a rising China is embroiled in disputes with its neighbors about control of certain islands and about the extent of China's territorial waters. In South Asia, India and Pakistan continue to dispute the status of India's Muslim-majority province, Kashmir. The two countries have gone to war several times since 1947 over the status of Kashmir, and now both are armed with nuclear weapons. In the Middle East, the location of the largest readily accessible deposits of the world's most valuable mineral, namely oil, Iran is seeking regional domination and pursuing the acquisition of nuclear weapons toward that end. And only recently, we've seen in Central Eurasia, Russia invade, occupy, and annex the Ukrainian province of Crimea. Now, each of these four regions has something in common. In each of them, an American military presence and American political engagement are crucial for sustaining the stability that globalization requires. Therefore, the future of the global economy does depend, to a very great extent, on the future of American foreign policy and especially American military policy. It depends upon the capacity and the willingness of the United States to provide the military forces on which global stability largely rests. American military policy and American military spending are under pressure. They're under pressure for fiscal reasons. They're under pressure because of the need to reduce federal spending, including military spending, to deal with America's chronic and chronically large budget deficits. And American military policy and American military spending and American military deployments are under pressure from the widespread public unhappiness in the United States with the consequences and the costs of the American military operations in Afghanistan and Iraq. Defense spending is going to drop. It's already doing so. The United States is going to pull back some of its military deployments. That is already happening. How far will these trends go, and how far can they safely go? Well, these are questions that are going to be debated in the years ahead, most notably in this city. But as that debate proceeds, it's important to remember that what is at stake is not simply the capacity of the United States to fight and win any particular war,